The mysterious case at the Hilltop mansion. It was a dark evening when you received a call from headquarters. A murder had just taken place at a mansion atop a lonely hill. Without hesitation, you drove straight to the scene, where 4 individuals had been present at the time of the victim's death. As you arrived at the mansion, the feeling of being a detective, much like the famous Conan, welled up inside you. Your task: find out who among the 4 is the killer. The mansion stood ominously, dim lights glowing from the large windows, casting long shadows across the lawn. The wind howled through the trees, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The iron gates creaked open as you entered, and inside, the witnesses were gathered in the grand living room. The victim, Mr. John, the owner of the mansion, lay slumped in his chair with a fatal wound to his chest. The crime scene showed no signs of a struggle, so you have only a spilled glass of red wine on the table next to him. The witnesses were: 1. Mrs. Mary, John's wife. She appeared deeply distressed, with her eyes red, yet no tears had fallen. She claimed to have been upstairs when the incident happened and knew nothing until she heard the servants scream. 2. Tom, John's son, a man in his 30s with a sharp gaze and a cold demeanor. He stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, seemingly calm and unaffected. Tom stated that he was in the library reading when his father was killed. 3. Anna, the family's longtime maid and the first to discover the body. She was hysterical, sobbing uncontrollably as she recounted the moment she found Mr. John's lifeless body while bringing him his evening tea. 4. Mr. William, a close friend of the victim, visiting John that very night. William stated that they had been drinking and talking, but he stepped outside to take a phone call. When he returned, John was already dead. As you began your investigation, you carefully listened to their statements and observed their body language. On the surface, none of them seemed like the murderer, yet someone was definitely lying. Everyone had an alibi, but something didn't feel right. While examining the crime scene, you noticed something unusual: a muddy footprint near the victim. This was odd since the weather had been dry all day. No one could explain the presence of this mud, so you kept this clue in mind as you questioned the suspects further. While you're processing the details of the case, don't forget to donate to keep our channel going via PayPal at LDT Group. Every small contribution helps us continue bringing more thrilling content. Also, like, subscribe, and share LDT Group to support us during these difficult times. You turned to Tom, the son of the victim, who seemed unfazed by his father's death. When asked about his relationship with John, he admitted that they had their disagreements in the past, but refused to elaborate further. His calmness made you suspect he was hiding something. Next, you questioned Mrs. Mary, the wife of the deceased. She seemed devastated, but something about her sadness didn't quite add up. She claimed that despite the strain on their marriage, she always tried to keep the family together. However, when you asked her about the night of the murder, her responses became vague and inconsistent, raising your suspicions. You then turned to Anna, the maid, who was still visibly shaken. She had worked for the family for years and had always been loyal. Her emotional reaction to finding the body seemed over the top, almost as if she was trying too hard to convince you of her innocence. Finally, you focused on Mr. William. He said that he had left the room to take a phone call and had not been present when John was killed. However, you noticed that his shoes were covered in mud, matching the footprint you found. When you confronted him about this, he explained that he had walked through the garden before coming inside, but you weren't entirely convinced by his story. The case was growing more complex. Each suspect had reasons to be guilty, but who had the strongest motive to kill John? The clues seemed to point in different directions, and you knew that solving this mystery would require careful attention to every detail. As you take a moment to reflect on the evidence, don't forget to donate via PayPal at LDT Group to support the channel. Your contributions, no matter how small, help us continue creating great content. Like, subscribe, and share LDT Group to keep us going. Analyzing the clues. After taking a moment to process everything, you began piecing together the evidence. The first odd detail that stood out was the muddy shoes worn by Mr. William. His explanation about walking through the garden didn't seem to fit, especially considering the weather that day had been completely dry. The muddy footprint near the body suggested that the person who left it must have been very close to the victim at the time of the murder. Next, you reviewed the behaviors of the suspects. Mrs. Mary, the victim's wife, seemed genuinely upset, but something about her demeanor was off. Her answers regarding the state of her marriage were evasive, and it felt like she was hiding something personal, perhaps not directly related to the murder, but significant nonetheless. Then there was Tom, the victim's son, who acted too indifferent for someone who had just lost a father. His strained relationship with John could be a motive, but without stronger evidence, it was difficult to pin the murder on him. He maintained that he was reading in the library the whole time, though there were no witnesses to confirm his story. Finally, you turned your attention back to Anna, the maid. Her emotional outburst upon discovering the body was a little too dramatic, which made you wonder if she was trying to cover something up. She had worked for the family for years, and while she seemed loyal, loyalty could also hide guilt. A key discovery. Returning to the crime scene for another inspection, you found something that you had initially overlooked. At the bottom of the spilled wine glass was a faint white powder. Could it be poison? The autopsy report confirmed that the stab wound was the cause of death. But if John had also been poisoned, this could suggest a more elaborate plan to ensure his demise. You questioned Anna again, as she was the one who brought tea to John that night. She vehemently denied tampering with the wine, insisting that she only handled the tea. But something about her nervousness made you press harder. You then decided to re-interrogate Mr. William. His muddy shoes were already suspicious, and now, with the potential poison as a factor, you wondered if he might have had an opportunity to tamper with John's drink. However, William stuck to his story about being outside on a call, only returning to find John dead. The timing seemed too coincidental, and you knew you had to dig deeper. As the tension built, take a moment to donate via PayPal at LDT Group to support the channel and help us continue delivering gripping stories like this. Your contributions are invaluable in keeping us running. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share LDT Group. The truth revealed. After carefully reviewing all the clues and testimonies, you decided it was time to confront Mr. William once again. His alibi of leaving the room during the murder was shaky, and the mud on his shoes directly connected him to the footprint near the body. When pressed further, he began to crack under the pressure. Finally, he confessed. It was William who killed John. The motive? A massive debt that William owed John. John had recently demanded that William pay him immediately, threatening to expose his friend's financial troubles if he didn't. Desperate and backed into a corner, William saw no other way out than to murder John. He had initially attempted to poison John, slipping the substance into his wine during their conversation. But when the poison didn't take effect fast enough and John remained conscious, William panicked and resorted to stabbing him. He thought that by claiming to have been outside on a phone call, he could create enough distance to escape suspicion. However, the muddy footprint and his inconsistent story unraveled his plan. With the case solved, you reflected on the complexity of human motives and how even the closest of friends can turn into enemies when pushed to the brink. Case closed. The investigation was over, and William was taken into custody. The case was a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and even the smallest detail, like a muddy footprint, can be the key to unlocking the truth. Before wrapping up, don't forget to donate to help keep the channel running via PayPal at LD Group. Your support allows us to continue bringing these thrilling mysteries to life. Please like, subscribe, and share LDT Group to help us grow and bring more exciting content.